All right, we've now come to our final speaker, Moritz Weigel of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. For those who don't know, they're the ones organizing the gigantic event over the river, and so are quite important in this process.
Good afternoon, fellow movement builders. I want to start by saying that education and awareness is absolutely key for bringing about the fundamental changes in the way we think and act that we need for building a sustainable future for all of us. And I'm very honored, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here today at your university in this beautiful city of Warsaw to speak to you on behalf of the United Nations Alliance on Climate Change Education, Training and Public Awareness. So we've launched this alliance last December to unite the expertise and the comparative strengths of United Nations organizations to work with governments and other stakeholders to build knowledge and skills and mobilize public support for ambitious climate action. As you can see, if you advance a bit further, by today this alliance consists of 13 of the biggest UN organizations. The objectives of the Alliance are to maximize synergies and coherence of activities among its members. The Alliance also establishes a clear link between the UNFCCC process on the one side and the work of the Alliance members on the other. The Alliance further aims to support countries in designing and undertaking activities on climate change education, training and public awareness. So what I'm going to do now, in 20 seconds per slide, which I'm going to try, is to give you a snapshot of what all these UN organizations do to address climate change through education, training, public awareness, public participation, and public access to information. Starting with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which supports the adoption of climate-smart agricultural practices, policy and finance approaches. FAO also develops climate change education initiatives and a wide area of inspiring educational resources that promote and foster behavioral change towards sustainable development. UNICEF supports countries in adopting a child-friendly approach to climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction by developing resource materials, conducting trainings at the local and national levels, and organizing international expert meetings on these topics. The UN Department of Public Information promotes global awareness and understanding of the United Nations work on climate change and builds partnership with academia, civil society, the entertainment industry, educators, young people to encourage support for the UN's activities on climate change. The United Nations Development Programme strengthens institutions and leadership on climate change at the national and subnational levels. UNDP produces public awareness materials, facilitates active participation of affected communities in climate change decision-making, and contributes to climate change education at schools and universities, mainly in developing countries. UN Women builds capacity of women in government delegations to UN climate change conferences through training and networking activities. UN Women also works with partners in advocacy on gender equality and climate change and supports countries and regions through programs on the ground to develop gender-responsive climate policies and strengthening of women's capacity to cope with the impacts of climate change. The United Nations Environment Programme supports countries in designing, launching and implementing national climate change outreach programs, developing long-term national action plans and strategies. And UNEP also trains journalists and educates especially young people on sustainable lifestyles. Furthermore, it produces and disseminates a broad variety of very inspiring information products, which some of you may be familiar with. The UNFCCC Secretariat, on the one hand, which is just happening across the river, as was said before, and where I'm just coming from, and I'm part of that team, services this intergovernmental negotiation process, is particular on these topics, on climate change education, training, and public awareness. And it also organizes an annual intergovernmental dialogue, as well as an open online platform on these issues. The UNFCCC also provides the Secretariat to this alliance. The United Nations Institute for Training and Research supports learning and capacity development to address climate change, and in particular, it hosts something called the One UN Training Platform on Climate Change, UNCC Learn, which supports countries in designing and implementing result-oriented and sustainable learning to address climate change. UNESCO responds to climate change through education by supporting countries to include climate change, disaster risk reduction in their education policies and plans, also in the curricula and in the teacher education programs. So UNESCO, above and beyond that, also develops teaching and learning materials and also has a clearinghouse on information for climate change education. The United Nations Secretary General's Climate Change Support Team supports the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in his efforts to promote actions that educate the public on climate change causes and solutions. The Secretary General's Climate Change Support Team also supports Ban Ki-moon's efforts in helping governments to build this new legally binding climate change agreement that colleagues across the river are working on right now. One of this means is the Climate Change Summit that the Secretary General is organizing next year in New York. The United Nations University addresses climate change education through education for sustainable development, through including climate change-related training, education, research and development in learning systems, mainly through its work of the 116 regional centers of expertise. The World Health Organization strengthens health systems' responses to climate change through advising on health's vulnerability and adaptation assessments. WHO also produces awareness-raising tools and manuals on the health impacts of climate change. The World Meteorological Organization, as we've just heard from Michael, supports countries to develop education and training programs on weather, climate, and water. WMO also raises public awareness on the most recent findings about climate change. So one of the first joint activity that this alliance is currently developing is a UN climate campaign. And so that is also the actual topic or reason that brought me here in the first place. We've just launched an online survey on our website, which I personally, and I think I speak on behalf of the Alliance, would be very grateful if you could invest a few minutes to let us know how you would do it. How should a climate change campaign look like? Maybe you could share with us those discussions that you had over the whole day and the insights that you got from the various experts that spoke to you today. This is the website from the Alliance that you see here. On that website you also find more detailed information on all those members that I just mentioned and the work of this Alliance in general. So I'd like to conclude then by thanking you on behalf of the 13 members, and I'm very happy to respond to any questions you might have.